YouTube final community, Weird Paul fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens. We are here today for another episode of What's Your Spin, and we're joined today by Weird Paul himself.
I've had Chip, I've had Peter Pan, I've had Skippy, I've had Superman. It's a peanut butter I remember them all.
Dude, this is great to have you on the show. Thanks,
Hey,
man.
thank you for having me, Giggens.
This rules. So, if anyone's new to this show, the idea of the show is to enjoy a band and be stoked about it. The internet is such a hate-filled place full of negativity, and we just want to talk about cool things for a while and spread some joy. So, what's the band you want to chat about today, Paul?
Well, my favorite band is the Ramones, so I thought that that's who we would talk about.
Perfect. So, Weird Paul, what's your spin on the Ramones? Why are
Well,
they great?
we'll have to go back to the 80s here to talk about this. So, I mean, I know the Ramones were around way before the 80s, but I kind of say I kind of lived a kind of a sheltered life. I grew up in the suburbs, not really in the city or anything like that. So my exposure to music was a lot of people say, "Oh, maybe your parents were really into cool music and that's how you got into all this." But my parents didn't listen to popular music or anything like that. Really,
Yeah.
they listened to easy listening and doo wop and stuff like that.
Wow.
So my the only real exposure I had to any kind of contemporary music that was considered maybe cool or hip was the Beatles when I was growing up. So it wasn't until the 80s when I started to discover music, and I discovered music through music videos
Yeah.
first. I didn't listen to the radio. I didn't understand that that was something that would have broadened my musical horizons. So
Interesting.
I started seeing music videos on TV. This was probably around 1982, going into 1983. And at that point, I realized that the songs that were in those videos were being played on the radio. And that's when I started turning on the radio,
Okay.
hearing music. So I listened to the pop music station first, got to the point where I could identify every song they played within the first two notes.
Nice.
I got to move on. I got to find something else to listen to. So then I moved on to the classic rock station and I listened to that for a few months. And by that time, same thing. I knew every song they played. I could name every band. And so from there on out, I was trying to figure out, where do I go next? Where do I go next? So I started tuning into all these other little stations on the dial, things that would barely come in, you could very low wattage, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And looking for anything interesting, something that I wasn't hearing on the other stations I was already listening to.
Yeah.
So eventually, after doing that, I discovered college radio. And this was getting close to the end of the 80s at this point. But
Yeah.
you could hear anything on college radio.
It's amazing.
So the first college station I found was a station in California, PA. It was California University. And they had a Friday night heavy metal show. So that was great because I was really into heavy metal and there was absolutely nowhere in Pittsburgh to listen to heavy metal at that particular time.
Yeah.
So I listened to that every Friday night, always wishing that there was more, but always camped out in front of the radio on Friday night. So around that time, this would have been October 1986, in my search through the radio dial for interesting content, I discovered the Dr. Demento show
Oh,
on some station that I never listened to otherwise, only on Sunday nights to listen to the Dr. Demento show. And he had Weird Al on as a guest, and Weird Al had a new album just came out in 1986. So he was the guest that night because of that, and he was also playing songs that he liked. Dr. Demento said, "Play us a song that you like, one of your favorite songs." And Weird Al played "Beat on the Brat" by the Ramones.
whoa.
I had never heard the Ramones before because, like I said, I had not discovered punk rock. There
Yeah.
was no way to hear that, even on the music video shows that I could watch, and that would be anything non-cable because my family did not have cable TV.
Yeah.
All I could have seen at that point was maybe Institutionalized by Suicidal Tendencies had been on some TV show that I had seen, and that's probably about it. So I didn't know anything about punk rock. I had heard all these punk rock bands' names. I was well aware of all the famous punk rock bands, but I just had not heard any of that music.
Yeah.
And even in earlier 1986, I know I had read a review of a Ramones album in Rolling Stone magazine, but I was always reading about stuff that I couldn't hear. And that was what drove me crazy growing up. It's like, how do I hear this? I don't have any money. I can't go out and buy the album. Now, that's the thing. These days, you could hear anything you want in a moment. That's
It's
you
so
just
different now.
search it, look it up. But boy, it was so much work.
It was
That,
different.
that's what made it though exciting when you
Yeah,
finally found that thing
the
and you were,
search.
yeah, that
Yeah,
search was really exciting.
yeah.
So anyway, to get back on the track of the story, that was really my first exposure to punk rock music. It was my first time ever hearing a Ramones song, and I think it's incredible that it was my favorite singer that brought it to me, Weird Al Yankovic,
It's
and
meant to be.
he was the one that guided me.
Yeah,
So I heard that song, and I was taping the interview with Weird Al off of the radio because I was obsessed with Weird Al, and so I ended up taping that song, and I just kept listening to that song over and over again. I was like, this is the most incredible thing I've ever heard.
yeah,
It's extremely short. There's there's nothing extra in it.
yeah.
Just
Bare bones.
it's just the song, and
Yeah,
there's nothing else in there to worry about at all.
yeah,
You've got that, and it was catchy, it was funny. I liked everything, how it sounded, the vocals, the guitar, everything was, it sounded great. I thought it was just the best thing I ever heard. And so the next day I got my sisters and my little brother, and I said, we're going to make a music video for this. I said, I just heard this song. So I said, I gave a baseball bat. It was like a wiffle ball bat to each of my sisters. I had one, and we all put the sunglasses on because I knew what the Ramones looked like, even though
right,
I had only ever heard this one song.
right.
So, so when we all stood there motionless and just kind of like with me lip syncing in the front, and then my little brother runs in out of nowhere, and I couldn't like really direct him. He was too little to like
Yeah,
say, you do this, you do that. He just ran in, and I was like, okay. When they say beat on the brat, then we're gonna, just start lightly tapping him with these bats, or we're gonna hurt him or anything.
yeah, yeah,
So that was, I was like, I latched onto it immediately. I was like, this is my favorite thing.
yeah.
Now the big issue for me at that point was, how do I hear more of this
Right,
music
right.
by the Ramones? I had no way, of doing it. So, and I don't know if I found this by accident or if it just started, but that radio station that had the heavy metal show on Friday night had a punk rock show on Saturday.
Oh, sweet.
And like I said, maybe it was something that I just didn't listen on Saturday nights because there was no metal or whatever. But I found that, and that was Ramones every week, multiple Ramones songs every week. So that was how I started hearing the Ramones, getting into the Ramones, and but I started to search the record stores where I lived. Now, like I said, I lived in the suburbs, so that was mostly just top 40 that you were going to find in the record
Right,
stores. So that
right.
was basically it. So I go in there looking under R in every record store, nothing. Come up empty-handed every time.
Yeah.
Once school was out in the summer, this would have been in 1987, I guess. My family was going to this other mall that was way across town. We hardly ever went there. And I said, I'm going to go to the record store in that mall just to see. Maybe they'll have some Ramones. And they had a couple Ramones albums there. And I had like every cent that I had to my name with me. And so I bought my first two Ramones albums
Oh my God.
that day. And the first one I bought was the first one.
Oh,
And the second one I bought that they had was this one. It was their third one, Rocket to Russia.
so good.
So I put this on because this had Beat on the Brat on it. As soon as I
Yeah,
saw it, I was like, oh, wow, this is the one.
yeah.
And I had maybe heard Blitzkrieg Bob at that point on the
Right.
radio, something like that. So I wasn't really familiar with the other songs, but I was like, it doesn't matter. I loved that song. It's good. So I put it on, and my first initial reaction to listening to the first Ramones album was, every song on here sounds exactly the same.
Yeah.
Am I missing something here? Is it the same song over and over again? And so I had to listen to it again. And on the repeat listen, I said, no, it's the same song over and
Yeah.
over. That's what
Yeah.
it is. And I had to listen to it a lot of times, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Before I started to pull out the differences between everything.
Right.
So, oh, okay. I see now. There's a different chord in there, or whatever. And so I played guitar. At that point, I'd been playing guitar for a couple of years. And so
Yeah.
I got my guitar out and started learning the songs. And it was so easy to learn. I had never played along to anything, but I
Right.
could learn the song on the first try.
Right.
By the
Right.
end of the song, I already knew the whole thing. And so I got to the point very quickly where I could play every song on the album. And what I would do once school started after that summer is I would put the record on. I'd get home from school, put the record on side one, and play along to every song on side one. Then I'd flip it over and play along to every song on side two. And I would do that every day after school. But
It's your
what I found
performance.
out was that album, when they recorded it, they only put the guitar in one channel.
Oh.
And that's like, if you, even now,
Huh.
if you go to certain videos on YouTube, or even the Muzak in the mall, sometimes if you go into like Hot Topic or something like that, and they're playing the Ramones, something from the first album, there will be no guitar in it
That's wild, man.
because
No idea.
they didn't put it. So what I would do when I was a teenager was I would turn the balance all the way to whatever side it was. There was no guitar. Then I was in the Ramones
Oh my God, that's cool.
playing along to the record, and I was the only guitar in it. So that was like, you know,
That rules. How
really
cool is
punk rock. That was
that?
really punk rock. So I got into the Ramones that way. Just had those two albums for a while, and then some kid in school said, "Oh, there's a record store downtown." Now downtown was like that was the verboten place to go. You know, you
Yeah.
take a bus down there, and I was like, okay. So we went down there, and then I'm just like, wow, which Ramones album do I buy next?
Oh my God, how
Because
cool.
they were all there. So
Yeah.
little by little, I started picking them all up. The first one I got was this one, which is now this is like just crazy to me that I got this.
Ooh,
This is like the
they just
this is
reissued
their
that one. Yeah.
double live album. But this is like I don't know if it's an original pressing, but it's a very early pressing. And
Yeah.
this is I mean it says Germany, France on it. So
How cool is that? It's shiny
and
cover. Yeah.
yeah, it's an import, I guess. But yeah, I mean I that's the thing. I always left the plastic on my records usually, but since it was a gatefold, I had to take the plastic off.
Yeah, you gotta see
But
it.
it looks pretty good. It looks pretty
Yeah.
good. So I just went from there, got all the records, obsessed,
Yeah.
just obsessed. And then in 1988, which was the year I started picking all that stuff, that was when I got to see the Ramones.
Oh,
I at
how cool,
uh,
man.
September 88. Yeah. And I just graduated high school, saw the Ramones were coming in the newspaper. I said to my sister, we got to go see the Ramones. My sister had never been to a concert before.
Oh,
And
whoa.
my mom said, yeah, that's okay. You could take her downtown to see the Ramones. So
Yeah.
we got on a bus, we headed down there. I mean, I still get chills thinking about the beginning of that concert.
Yeah.
The stage was just filled with smoke. You couldn't see anything. It was a fog, of course.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the guitar started, the drums started, everything, but you couldn't see anything. And then slowly the fog started to fade, and you just saw this huge figure at the front of the stage. It was Joey standing there holding the microphone. It was an unbelievable moment just to think back and remember that, and just the whole thing. What a great tour that was, because it was the last tour that Dee Dee was part of. After
That's
that,
right.
he he quit the band. Of course, he let me see, do I have this here?
You got his solo record.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I have it. I have it, but I don't see it. Maybe I didn't grab it. It's not sitting here, but his rap record
Oh my God, I
that he
know.
put out. And of course, I bought that too when it came out. My sister, I was like, "Oh my God, we got to get this."
Oh
I
yeah.
don't care what it sounded like, but
That's good.
it was just such an amazing show. Now, Jane's Addiction opened.
Oh, they
That
were new at that point.
they opened, and
Wow.
they were really new. They hadn't really. Well, I mean, they hadn't charted or anything like that. They had
Yeah.
like one released thing at that point, but it
Yeah.
wasn't like something national that people everywhere knew about or anything.
Yeah.
They got booed off the stage, which is not surprising me in retrospect. I mean, you got a really, really dedicated Ramones crowd here,
Yeah.
and then Jane's Addiction get up, and everybody's waiting for the Ramones. And Jane's Addiction are not Ramones.
And then the guitars.
Let's be very, very clear here. I mean, but they were I'm gonna be honest, they didn't sound good. It could have been the sound system too that
Sure.
night, but
Yeah.
the EQ maybe was off, but they sounded pretty bad, and they got decimated, man. The audience didn't want them at all, so they cut their set short and
So they
got
actually did leave the stage.
yeah. Actually, I mean,
Wow.
Harry Farrell actually yelled an expletive at the audience and dropped his mic. He dropped his mic very, very. I mean, he must have dropped it high enough because it made a very loud noise.
Yeah.
That I do remember. But that's that's how I got into the Ramones. I got to see them twice. That show I saw them at was Marky was back because that
Yeah.
was Richie left. Dee Dee was still in the band. I mean, I couldn't.
You lucked out.
Exactly. I couldn't
Yeah.
be any happier that I got to see that. And
God,
then the next time I saw him, of course, CJ was in the band. So playing
was
the
it the
bass.
90s? We saw him
That
again?
was 91.
No, oh, early. Wow. Jeez. Okay.
So those are the two times I got to see him. Of course, I'm obviously jealous. I mean, there's plenty of people that say, "Oh, I can't believe you got to see the Ramones." You know,
It's
I'm
unreal.
jealous to all the people that say to me, "I saw them in '78." I'm like, but
That's the I remember taking a class in college and sitting next to a guy who was in his 30s at that time. He's like, I saw Nirvana. And I'm like, how old are you? I was like-
right,
It was
right.
you never I mean I meet people who saw Jimi Hendrix and it's like you saw Jimi Hendrix like the Ramones or one of those bands that like wow you saw them. It's like it's
That
special.
yeah, it's like that. It's that point now. It's legend.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that contributes to that now is because most of them are gone. I mean,
Yeah.
if
True.
you look at it, if you, I always say all the original members are gone because that's true.
That's true.
Marky is not an original member.
Right.
Marky's still around. Richie's still around. CJ's still around. But
Yeah.
everybody else is gone. Even Elvis Ramon, who was only in the band for 2 shows, gone.
It's true.
So
That's
uh, nothing makes me sadder than the fact that they're all gone.
I know it's hard watching these rock and roll heroes go away because it's like you're supposed to be here forever. Like you're
Yeah.
just supposed to be there,
At
like
least a little longer, guys.
yeah, a little bit longer. Yeah, I mean I'm a Brian fan, so even though he's gone, it's just like how you can't go. Like there's more to
Right.
do.
Sure, absolutely. That's how I always feel.
Man. Well, you mentioned earlier, well, actually two questions. Are those your original records you bought back in the day that you held up from the
Yeah,
80s?
these are all the originals.
That's
I
so cool. You have the Super Saver sticker. I love
Yeah,
those.
this is my favorite one right here.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
Probably, I mean, it's really hard for me to pick. The '70s ones are great. This is my favorite '80s Ramones album anyway, Subterranean
Yeah.
Devil. I always laugh at this one because Marky was not he was not doing well when they made this
Yeah.
alcohol, and so they just put his picture in the bus window. I don't know if you could see it. Where is it
Oh, he's
at?
like photoshopped in?
Yeah, he's photoshopped in. Oh yeah, right there.
I never realized that.
Yeah, because they couldn't get him there for the picture
Oh,
of them on the subway. The other really interesting thing about this album cover is if you look at Dee Dee, and it's hard to show, but okay,
yeah.
so he was either not wearing a shirt at all that day,
Oh, he's gonna, yeah, look at that.
or or he was wearing something that they could not put on a record cover
Yeah, they
because
pointed it
you can
out.
see right there that that is painted on.
That's funny,
So
man.
a lot of it because this was long before Photoshop, right?
Right,
I mean,
right,
somebody had
right,
to sit there and be like,
right.
with their hand and do
I've seen that cover probably 1,000 times. I never even put the two together.
I spent a lot of time staring at these because that's what you did back in the '80s. Because what else were you going to look at?
That's
You weren't going to watch the YouTube video going by while the song played, or
that's what I was gonna ask you next was like, your your presence online is cool because you show what it was like back in the day, making videos with your brothers and sisters, recording, just at home. And now you have such a presence online, being a Twitch streamer and YouTuber. Do you think that people appreciated music differently back when you were a teenager? Even though there's more access to music now, do you think because there was a limited access back then, you liked more what you had? Or how would you describe people's relationships with music now?
that's an interesting question. Um, well, I feel like you were almost forcibly exposed to more music in the growing up in the '80s. The
Really?
reason is, well, yeah, because if you put the radio on, you were at the mercy of what they were going to play next.
True.
You could turn it off, but if you wanted to keep listening to music, then you're going to have to leave it on. And the
Yeah.
same thing with watching music videos, which believe me, I'm one of a very, very large amount of the population that was doing that back in the '80s. I mean,
That
that's
was that was your generation.
it's
Yeah.
all about.
Yeah.
So you were watching one, and then the next thing that came on, believe me, and I say believe me a lot because nobody's there now. We're all
Uh,
there now. I remember watching MTV, and something would be on that I was really excited about come on, and then the next video to come on would be the one that I'd already seen 3 times that day.
yeah, right.
And so I was like, I don't want to see this again. But you
Yeah.
have to keep, if you wanted to see what was on next, you had to keep watching. So that's how I ended up hearing a lot of songs that normally I would never have listened to ever. And I heard them so many times. And
Right.
so now, though, you don't have to really do that because nobody's watching MTV, let's
Yeah.
face it. And also, there's not a lot, there's very limited listening of the radio compared to what it was when I was growing up. So now you go to YouTube, you watch what you want to watch. If something comes on you don't want to watch, well, I'll go watch something else. I'll go
Yeah.
find the next thing that I want to watch.
Yeah.
So that's what it's down to. Your choices now are so broad. I mean, people don't just if you weren't around back then, you can't fathom the difference that there is. It's gone from this to everything. I
Yeah.
mean, you
Yeah.
literally have access to everything. I remember when I was a teenager, I said to myself, someday you'll be able to watch any music video you want at any time. You'll go on this thing,
Yeah.
whatever the screen, and it'll have all the and you just pick the one you want to watch.
You predicted it, man.
I could see it happening,
Yeah. You put it out
but
in the universe.
yeah. Uh, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, that's this is what I'm saying. It's both a good thing and a bad thing.
So to tag on to your mentioning about like having to watch videos to wait for your next one to come on that you wanted to see, do you feel like people back then, because I was a baby in the 80s, in the late 80s, so I missed all that. Was there, if everyone was watching MTV and you had your favorite bands, but you kind of suffered through the bands that you didn't like, but maybe some people loved those bands that you didn't like,
Of
do you feel
course.
like people had more of a wider range of music in common, even if they weren't too into it? Whereas these days, you can have a Spotify playlist tell you exactly what to listen to. Do you think more people knew things that they didn't necessarily want to listen to back then?
Well, I can't go by me because I have always just wanted to hear everything.
Right, right.
I've just always said, what else is there? And I need to hear that too.
Yeah,
But you couldn't help but be exposed to more music back then. If you were, if you were only willing to watch, rather, what I'm trying to say is, if you were only willing to listen to one radio station, then what you're hearing was going to be limited to top 40, for instance. You
right,
weren't going to hear anything outside of that.
right.
But you were still going to hear popular versions of whatever. So you were going to hear a lot of hair metal, for instance, was extremely popular, but you wouldn't be listening to a lot of heavy metal. You were still going to hear that.
Yeah,
You're still going to hear some metal. You're going to still hear a lot of new wave in the early 80s, even if you weren't really into it, because that was going to be on the radio.
it was just there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
And the only thing you wouldn't hear, maybe you would hear a little bit of crossover on
yeah,
stuff like that. Country, for instance, in the very early 80s, if you look at what was in the top 10, it's mind blowing. You might have a new wave song, and then there'd be Pink Floyd, and then a country song, and then like Motown level soul in
yeah.
there. People don't really either don't remember that or they weren't there when it happened, but it is mind blowing to see
Even
that.
even 20 years ago, early 2000s was like that. Pop, rock was still big, and it blended in well with pop and hip hop and stuff on the charts. Like the charts were so different back then.
Ah,
Speaking of like appreciating music and finding your place with it, when you discovered the Ramones, and then learning more about them over the next couple of years, buying their records, and being introduced to them, did you have friends who were also really into them, or did you expose friends to the Ramones, and then did they get into it because of you, or what was it like to share the Ramones gospel, if you will?
I think it was a little bit of both, because it wasn't around the time I got in. See, when I was in high school, I didn't really have any friends. I got picked on. I
Same.
ate lunch alone every day,
Yep.
cafeteria. Like, I'd be sitting at a chair at a table, and all the chairs around me were empty. You know what I'm saying? So
Heartbreaking, man.
sometime around 1987, when I started my senior year of high school, for some reason, and I like to say I've been ahead of my time. Most of my life I've been ahead of my time. I'm still ahead of my time in some ways,
Yeah.
I believe, but that's not something we're going to talk about right now. But I think that maybe by the time I was a senior in high school, I think that some of the ways I was ahead of my time, I feel like some of the other kids were like, "Oh, we get it now. That's what you're doing."
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Suddenly somebody said, "Hey, come sit with us." And next thing I know, I'm sitting at this table full of other kids. There's no empty seats. People are trying to get a seat at the table. Like, "Oh, is there an empty seat there today?" Nope.
How
Paul's sitting there.
cool, man. It's
So
like a
you know what I'm saying? So that was when I was like, okay, Ramones, everybody, Ramones.
tastemaker. Yeah.
Like, and everybody's
Influencer.
like, oh, if they were like, yeah, Ramones, or they were like, I don't know who that is, but I got to go listen to them now. So that was my moment in high school. I was like, okay, because I started to come to school wearing a Ramones shirt. I
Yeah.
had a shirt that said Ramones Live 1988 on it. This was early 1988. And this girl comes up to me and she says, Ramones Live 1988. I was like, no, 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 no. You don't get it. Because most people had not heard of the Ramones. And I
Yeah.
don't know if and that's another thing. I don't know if people realize this. The Ramones were persona non grata back in the 80s. Nobody listened to them. You had to have been like into punk rock or into obscure music or something.
Yeah.
Nobody knew who they were, or if they knew who they were, they didn't listen to them. The
Yeah.
Ramones were like nobody. Because I remember when Pet Sematary came out, they did the theme song for the movie Pet Sematary. When
Right.
I saw them on MTV playing that, I said, "Oh my God, this is it. These guys are finally going to make it. They're finally going to be big." They didn't. They absolutely didn't. They didn't do anything. And even when the Ramones broke up, they were only really popular in South America,
Yeah, they were huge down there.
countries here.
Yeah.
They were still not popular in the United States. And of course, now that's completely changed. You hear their songs in commercials and at
Yeah.
sports events and everything, now that they're all gone.
What's it like to have lived through the era where they were still around? You got to see them together with the original group. Now that most of them are gone, what do you think their legacy is? Because, like, when I was in high school, kids who weren't necessarily into music would wear Ramones shirts and not know anything about the band, but they liked how the shirt looked. So, like, what do you think their cultural impact was to sort of sway coolness or some sort of hip, unique persona for people to gravitate towards?
Well, I would like to preface that question with this factoid. I used to work at the mall. I worked at Spencer's at the
Yeah,
mall, and we sold all music T-shirts. And people
yeah.
would come in there with a pair of shoes that they had just bought at another store, and they'd say, "Do you have any shirts that match this color?" The shoes, and they didn't care what it was. And we'd have people come in and say, I've never heard of Nirvana, but that goes with these shoes, so I'm going to buy it."
Yeah,
That happened all the time. So
yeah,
it doesn't matter. It
yeah,
doesn't even matter whether you know who the band is to wear the shirt anymore. It's
right.
not important. But to answer the question,
That's funny.
um, I feel like the Ramones, they're not like the kind of thing that you're going to latch on to immediately. Hearing them, perhaps they have a couple songs that I think have like a really enduring popularity. Blitzkrieg Bop is one,
Yeah,
of course, just because you hear it a lot now. It's used
yeah,
in many things.
right.
But if you want to feel like you're trying to show that you're cool and show that you know what's up with music, because the Ramones were such an early uh, they were such an early example of the kind of music that went on to become important and popular.
Yeah,
Again, the Ramones, when the Ramones started out, nobody much really listened to them. Nobody really cared about them. They weren't popular. They
yeah,
were popular amongst a certain amount of people, a certain group of people.
right.
And the cool people, perhaps you could say, I don't know. So that's what I'm saying. It's not if you're wearing clothes just that you want to look cool, that's you can't go wrong with wearing the Ramones because
It
they
looks awesome.
were they were cool.
It looks cool.
They were cool. They stand for something
Yeah,
special because they originated something,
yeah,
uh, kept doing the same thing. Didn't matter that disco came in. Almost every band when disco came in did a disco song. Almost
yeah,
every single band.
yeah,
Um, but the Ramones didn't because they never changed what they did. They just did the same thing and they just did it better sometimes
yeah.
than other times.
True.
And
Yeah,
uh, they were there's plenty of bands that have copied the Ramones, but there was nothing like that sounded like that before the
that's exactly it. Yeah. I got two more questions for you, man. Then we could wrap up.
Okay.
What's your relationship like with the Maroons now that you've been playing them for over 30 years? Like, you still wearing a shirt, you still want to talk about them, you still have passion about them. How have they stayed with you in your life, and what are they like for you now?
Well, the simplest way for me to answer that question is in 1988, I asked my mom to cut my hair like this. And when I asked her to cut it like this, I held up a picture of Johnny Ramone.
It's
I said,
perfect.
this is how I want you to cut it. And this to me, some people get a tattoo on their shoulder or their leg or whatever of their favorite band's name or insignia. This is the tattoo right here.
Yeah.
This is my Ramones tattoo.
Yeah.
I carry this through my life because of my lifelong love for this band.
That's so
That's
cool.
my testament.
It's funny you say I've always loved the haircut, but I've never put the two together. Now that you say like, oh my God, it's a completely Ramones haircut. It's
Yeah.
entirely Ramones. Um, Last question for you, man. If an alien landed on planet Earth and walked to your front door and said, I want to discover the Ramones, what's the one album I should play?
Let's see. I would say maybe this one,
Oh, Road to Ruin.
The Ruin. I
Why?
think that this one is a little more accessible than some of the stuff that came before it.
Yeah,
It's not as like totally out there pop oriented, maybe as End of the Century can be, or Pleasant Dreams. It's still
yeah,
really punk rock. The production is really smooth, though, without losing the rawness. And
yeah.
I think that that's would be the perfect example for that Alien.
Perfect, man. Paul, it's an honor to chat with you. I've been a big fan of yours for a very long time, so this has
Thank
been
you.
really cool,
Appreciate it.
musically and internet wise with your videos. But for everybody watching, Paul, where can they find you?
You can find me everywhere on TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, Facebook. Um, just, everywhere, anywhere that you are, find me there.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Giggens.